Welcome everyone to our Behavior Change special series. SLAP, Silver Lining Action Plan, our 13-month program, is built based on behavior change science. And so we wanted to take a moment and really gather the top leading behavior change experts of 2018 to help us learn more about this incredibly fascinating field of study. So at Silver Lining, we truly believe that in order for a small business to succeed and to hit their growth goals, they must form healthy success habits. And here's the great news, there is a recipe for success. And so we have created this special series in order to help small businesses, just as yourself, to get the results that you're looking for. So today we are incredibly excited to welcome Dr. Josh Davis. He is the author of an international best-selling book, 2 Awesome Hours. He is Senior Director of Research and Faculty at the Institute for Personal Leadership. He is a trainer at the NLP Center of New York City and teaches the art of public speaking. He received his doctorate from Columbia University and was a psychology professor at Barnard College of Columbia University and was a psychology professor at Barnard College of Columbia University prior to working in leadership development. His writing has appeared everywhere. It's been in Harvard Business Review, Business Insider, Fast Company, Huffington Post, Strategy and Business, Training and Development, People and Strategy, Psychology Today, and the list goes on and on. He or his work have been mentioned in the Times of London, the Financial Times, and the Wall Street Journal, and many other major media sources. So welcome, Josh. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's a bio a mile long, very impressive. We're incredibly thrilled. Thank you for being here. And let's just start off by saying, we're just coming into the holiday season. And in a very few short weeks, it's going to be January 1st. It's a really special day for some people. Some people really look forward to this day, and some people really dread this day. And certainly for myself, I've fallen into the statistic of many individuals, we set these New Year's resolutions for ourselves, whether that be personal or professional. For a lot of us, it's both. However, and I know for myself, I definitely fall into this category. I set that goal for myself, New Year's resolution, I set that goal, but I struggle to take the proper actions that are actually helping me to hit the goal. And then I often get defeated, and then I end up just giving up on the goal altogether and feel kind of disappointed in myself. So in your opinion, what is in the way of people hitting their goals in general?
Yeah. So there's New Year's resolutions, but as well as any goal. What New Year's resolutions kind of throw into relief is that we've spent so much focus on the part of it where it's about, I'm really committed this time. I really care, right? We spend a lot of time saying what really matters. We do something really nice, which is to take the big picture view. We step back and we look at the whole year, right? And so those things are important. They're just not enough, right? The amount of commitment is not actually that correlated with whether you're going to follow through. The things that have to do, and by the way, the stats on New Year's resolutions are just terrible. It's
right.
Well more than half of people don't follow through. The trick is that it's not about the intensity of the emotion. It's not about the commitment, right? There are certain factors, and when I say them, it will be on the one hand obvious, right? You'll say, okay, yeah, I've come across that. On the other hand, I think until you know that there's research behind it, that's really worth putting the extra effort into. How do I, and some of it may also be counterintuitive or maybe new too. There's some nuances that may be different. So here are some of the things that are absolutely critical. One of them is actually on the motivation side. So even though there's all that commitment, there's a piece of motivation that's incredibly powerful that very few people take advantage of. And that is to connect whatever it is that you're doing to the bigger picture why, the reason why, right? So the more that reason why is at the core of who you are, the more relevant it's going to be, the more it's going to pop up day to day throughout your entire year, throughout your entire life. So if I'm thinking, you know what, I'm going to lose 10 pounds this year, it's going to happen finally, right? Or I'm going to start going to the gym. or maybe it's something with my business. I'm finally going to hire that person to take over this piece and let them manage it, so I can focus over here.
So
well,
it sounds like,
yeah.
Sorry, it sounds like you're saying that the reason why is really part of such an important part of what we know is important about behavior change is finding the true motivation behind something. So changing the behavior is so directly tied to real motivation, and you're saying that the reason why, that's how we connect into that motivation?
It's a major source of it. It's not the only piece of motivation, but it's a major and enduring source, and it's very close to who you are as a person. So it's something that's always relevant. So for example, if I can figure out, well, I think of myself as a healthy person, right? And I'm not living up to that right now. And if I do actually, the reason why I want to actually lose these 10 pounds or start going to the gym is because I can be the person that I, in my mind really believe I am, right? Need to be. Then I'm connecting it to a very powerful reason why, right? And like, or maybe on the business example, maybe what was the whole purpose of me starting this business? Well, it was so that I could have the flexibility to do this type of creative work, right? Well, the reason why I'm trying to learn to delegate here is not because I need to learn to delegate. It's not because I'm trying to free up time. It's because this is what's going to enable me to get out of my business what I got into it for in the first place, to get to do that creative side of the work, right? And then all of a sudden it's a different equation. So that's, I think, the first thing is to take that additional step, and it takes some work. It doesn't have to be more than a day or even an hour, but it does take some work of really thinking about it. Maybe it's something that you ponder over the course of many days. So that's the first step.
First step, figuring out the reason why. One of the things we ask our clients to do when they first join SLAP is to create an impact statement for themselves. So by reaching the goal that they're trying to achieve with their business, the impact that will have in their life is X, Y, and Z. It sounds like that's exactly what you're talking about with this reason, the reason why, the reason the goal matters to us on a deep level.
That's really
so that's
nice.
very, very interesting. In your opinion, besides really understanding the true motivation and connecting the goal to a why, what do people need to hit their goals? There's successful, we see it in our business, there's really successful business owners, and there's business owners who have really successful business models, but they're just not successful in hitting their goals. Are there specific actions that the successful people are taking that inevitably is going to bring them closer to reaching the goals that they're trying to succeed at hitting?
So yes. And
what are they? What's the secret?
Okay. So now some of the things that are a little bit more obvious are that you need a plan, right? You need to actually map out what are the actual steps, right? Sure. I think probably most people listening to this or watching this already know that and are probably already pretty good at mapping out a plan. If not, you can, have somebody sit down with you and who's good at it and help you work it out, right? Once you know what the goal is, though, even if you've got really good motivation behind it, the thing is, there's some fabulous research that shows that what really matters is not the strength of the intention, the strength of the motivation, or any of those pieces. It's that what really matters is that once you set out to do it, life gets in the way, right? There's various things that come up. You don't just go into, it's like, okay, I'm going to get to the gym, right? Or, okay, I'm going to hire this person, right? But then you get to work and there's a million things that need your attention. Or maybe you're tired that day, right? Or maybe, you had to, you had this unexpected fire you had to put out with the client, right? Or, there's some, legal or safety issue that comes. These things are going to happen, right? It's not like these are the aberrations. These things are going to happen, right? So we have to plan for that. We have to say in a realistic scenario, in a real life scenario, what are the steps that we would need to take then to ensure that we actually engage in the behavior? Now, these go by the fancy name in research is implementation intentions. What's your intention for how you're going to implement it? And then the more colloquial term for this is if-then plans. So if I get to work and I'm tired, this is what I'm going to do. So you actually have planned ahead for all these different possibilities, all these different ways the days could go, right? If I have to put out a fire, then what am I going to do to ensure that I do take a step towards this goal, right? So after having planned those things out and actually really specifically thought about when and where you're going to do it, actually really linked up the trigger. If this happens, then I'm going to take this new behavior. Linked up that trigger to the new behavior, the likelihood that you're going to do it goes up dramatically. And this has been shown across all kinds of goals, whether it's self-improvement goals or learning goals or one of the few things in psychology research that is just, across the board robust and useful. And an additional thing you can do is take a moment and actually visualize yourself there in that time in the future. This is going to happen, and then what's my new action? What am I going to take? If I'm tired that day, if I get home late, if I have this issue that comes up with my kids, right? Then what am I going to do? Right? And if you visualize that helps to strengthen it even more. What's happening is that you're activating the same neural circuitry you would as if you're, well, not entirely, but a lot of it, as if you were actually engaging in the behavior in response to whatever that trigger was in your environment. So you're making a link. You're using the same neural circuitry to a large degree.
Interesting.
So then when you get there, it's automatic.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just wrapping that up with when you get there, it's automatic. Yeah.
Right. So it sounds like when we are not, and I mean, I think this is a piece that, human beings do. There's this idea of this we should know or should do something. So it sounds like what you're saying is when we're not acknowledging the normalcy of things not going to plan, that is going to lessen our chance of succeeding. Is that because we're getting discouraged with ourselves, not following this sort of perfect idea of the way we should do something? Yeah,
well, so the should piece is an issue in several ways. So one of them, I would say, right on target with what you're just saying right here, that we're not acknowledging that, in fact, life shouldn't go according to plan, right? That there will be a lot of things that come up that will get in the way, right? And let's plan for those because it's going to happen, right? And if we keep going through saying, well, it should be the other way, then you're just going to feel bad, right? You're going to keep falling short of expectations, and we all know how that feels, right? So you're going to feel bad. It's going to make it harder. You're going to have less energy, not going to feel as good about yourself. That then also taps into another problem with the should, which is the emotional energy. Now, sometimes that should is a really powerful way to get you going, but if things fail and you're kind of operating with, oh, I should have done this, then what typically happens is people just pile on and they just keep beating up themselves, right? Mm-hmm. And, if you're trying to motivate somebody else and let's say they just stumbled, right? They didn't get something delivered on time, right? And you come up to them and you just say, you should have had that done. You should have planned ahead. You should have, right? How motivated are they to pick up and say, you know what? I'm going to go and make this happen right now, right? You do that to yourself and you get the same result. Right. Got it. I mean, that makes so much sense. If it's when we're talking about it, it does seem kind of obvious. Right. What's in the way of accepting that? And why don't we just innately have that self-awareness of what seems so obvious when we're speaking about it? What's the gap there? Can you close the gap for us? Yeah. Well, I've thought about this a lot. I think one thing is that, I forget which famous person said it, but the mark of a good idea is that it seems kind of simple and obvious afterwards. Yeah. Right? So that means that these are probably good ideas, right? If they seem like common sense afterwards. But then also, I really do think that people do the best they know how to do in the moment, right? And so if you haven't spent the time focusing on a particular issue, it's like this particular stumbling block in getting to my goals, right? Maybe you've been busy, you've been focused on other things, right? Nobody's ever drawn your attention to that. So you haven't spent time focusing on that. And in that case, you kind of just operated without even thinking about it with like, well, how am I going to motivate myself? I'm going to say, you should have done this, you should have done that, right? It's sort of, I think the intention there is usually to get you to operate better the next time around. The thing is, it just doesn't usually work that well. But it's a good intention. And if you take a moment and you unpack that and you think about, okay, that is my intention. Well, what would be a better way for me to get there? Then all of a sudden, oftentimes people can come up with a better way. But so I
Right.
think one reason is we just haven't focused there. But I think another reason is until you know that it is kind of supported by research or does make sense with how brains work in general, right? And it's not just an issue for some people, then it's very easy to say, well, look, there's so many things I could do. There's so much advice out there. Why should I pay attention? It's not worth 5 minutes to even investigate it, because how do I know that I'm doing it right, or that it's not just relevant for this person in this context? And so when you learn that, okay, actually, this is a thing for everyone. This is, the research supports that this is the case. This is kind of how brains operate. It's worth investing a few minutes to actually kind of explore that. So I think that while it can seem obvious after the fact, I think there are good reasons that we haven't actually gone there before.
Yeah, that makes so much sense to me. We're speaking about obviously, you've got this laundry list, long of experience and credentials, and research that you've done. How would you apply your research directly to a small business owner? What would you say to someone, if small business owners right in front of you today, they're listening to you, what are the key behaviors that small business owners should adopt in order to close that gap and become more successful in hitting the goals? We've heard the reason why, we've heard, this if then, I love that, having a plan. Are there any other things that a small business owner can do, in your opinion,
Yeah.
from all of your experience?
Yeah. Well, so there's two other things that come to my mind that I think are particularly relevant here for kind of making sure that the goals that matter are the ones that you follow through on. And I do want to stress that the goals that matter, because I do it, we set goals, and some of them don't actually matter the most, and they don't need to be followed through on. And that also, to be a successful business owner and leader, that's something that you need to be checking in on, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, which things actually do I want to continue with, do make sense, big picture for me? And so being connected with that why is also a critical piece of being able to make those decisions about, well, what did I get into this for? What's this all about ultimately? And which are the things that are going to lead to that? What's actually going to lead to the success of my business? What's the most important stuff, right? And acknowledging that we actually are not going to be able to do everything, right? So this becomes an important part of it that really was central in my book as well. It's something I call decision points. And I'm not the first person in the world to have thought of this, but I offer in the book many ways to make it kind of easy, as well as research to support why it makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But the idea is that, we all know we need to get to the stuff that's important, right? And if you've read Covey, right, we need to get to the stuff that's important and not urgent. Actually, that's going to be the most relevant to get to. Often our big goals are in that category, right? And so, often we even know what that is, right? Often you could say, yeah, well, I've set those goals because they're important, even though they're not urgent, right? And sometimes they're important and urgent, right? But they're important nonetheless, right? And we're not getting to them, or not sufficiently, or not fast enough. So the question isn't knowing that you need to do that. The question is, how do you get yourself to do it on a day-to-day basis? And this comes back to some of those things like why we needed the if-then plans, but there's a couple of other things as well. So one of them is, there's another kind of obstacle that's very common, which is that sometimes if you get what you want, it's not what you want. Meaning the outcome of the outcome is a problem for you. And until you've addressed that, there will be some internal resistance. So let's say I do manage to hire this other person, right, to manage this piece of the business so I can focus on this creative side or this business development side. Well, what if all of a sudden I think to myself, oh my God, now I'm in a position where I have to deliver and I don't feel like I'm qualified, right? I don't know if anybody listening has ever had the sense of imposter syndrome, right? And I'm just going to guess that we all have, right? Yeah, right. That's one example of an issue. Or for some people, it's like, well, if I actually get healthy, then I'm going to have to continue with this for the rest of my life, right? I'm getting into something that I'm not ready to commit to, right? So there's lots of the outcome of the outcome, right? If I get this, how's this going to affect the people around me? How's this going to affect my, other things that I'm then going to be kind of asking myself to do, or that others might be asking me to do? If that's a problem, there is going to be some resistance. And so if you take some time and you think about that and think like, okay, well, am I okay with that? Am I willing to at least try? Like, am I open to exploring what will happen if I get that? if I'm in that position. Maybe I don't know now. Maybe I can make a deal with myself that I can start exercising, and I'm going to promise myself, as odd as it sounds, that I'm not going to commit to doing this for the rest of my life, right? Just so that I have the freedom to try it out, if that ends up being the issue. So that one is a little bit harder typically for people to unpack on their own. Like, what's the outcome of the outcome? Another way of asking it would be, why would it be a problem if I actually got my goal? How would this cause problems for me is a good question to ask. And, at first the answer is usually, well, no, it wouldn't. Of course, it's my goal. It's what I want. But if you let yourself explore that, oftentimes some things do come up, and then you can think about, all right, well, how am I going to address that? Or what deal am I going to make with myself? Or how can I be open to taking the first step in this journey?
Wonderful.
And that often is a critical piece. Then the other one is, periodically, I recommend doing it at the beginning of every day. Some people like to do it at the end of every day and the beginning. And also, I recommend doing this multiple times throughout the day whenever you take a break, whenever you finish a project. I personally actually deliberately step away from my desk if I've been sitting for too long to do it as well. And that is to pause for 1 minute and reflect until I can reconnect with what really matters. What's the important stuff? Big picture. If I am, writing, if I am putting myself in a position to do public speaking, right? Those are the things that I really want to be doing. Does that matter? The important stuff, right? Or maybe it's something with my family, if I am really reaching out and, setting up play dates and things, right? But it's the important stuff for me. I want to connect with what that is and think about, all right, given that, how do I want to make sure that I have some really good, clear thinking time for that stuff, right? And if it can't be right now, maybe later in the day after I exercise, right? Or maybe today's not going to be possible and I'm going to figure out a way that it happens tomorrow. But these things are the important things. These are the things where if I get through the day and I haven't done them and I haven't addressed them at least in a meaningful way, I'm going to feel bad about myself, and I should, right? So
it sounds like, yeah. I mean, what I'm hearing you say through all that was a lot of amazing information. Thank you very, very much. So much good insight there. It's as much as learning the important versus urgent. And I would say, is it also important to throw in what we shouldn't be focusing on? So we often teach our clients what we have to say no to. By having clarity, it's often about just saying no to things that don't make sense. I love how you touched on the imposter syndrome. Yes, certainly felt that way many times in my life. It's an interesting one to unpack. And the pause and reflecting is really interesting for us. We actually take our clients through a pausing and reflecting exercise on a weekly, a monthly, and a quarterly basis. Can you just talk a little bit more? You really spoke a lot about pausing and reflecting, how that seems to be a daily habit of yours. And that you feel it's one of the most successful, it's one of the most important habits that a person can do in order to be successful. Can you just give us a glimpse into what, I know that you said you get up and stand, you can step away from your desk, but can you just give us a little bit of an idea about, the process, the pause and reflect process on a daily, weekly basis for you? Is it simply taking a few moments every day and think, what questions are you asking yourself? If you could just unpack that a little bit more, I think that would be very helpful. We're constantly talking about pausing and reflecting with our clients. And I would say it's one of the topics we get probably the most pushback on. And the feedback we get is, I don't have time to pause, I don't have time to take 15 minutes and think about, so talk to us about, just talk more about the importance of pause and reflect and how that truly can change your thinking, your mindset, and then ultimately your behavior over time. So I think it's a very important piece of the behavior change puzzle that we all need to understand more about.
So I will speak about the importance of that. And there's something else you said that I'd really like to jump in on as well, which is people push back and say, I don't have the time.
Mm-hmm. Right? Talk to us about that.
So I'm gonna make a different argument, which is that that's actually how time gets wasted. If you have ever felt like you've wasted the whole morning or the whole afternoon, or you're just like, why did I just spend an hour doing that, right? Or if you ever feel like you just worked on something and it wasn't the most important project, that's how time gets wasted. That can be hours of the day, right? Painful, and you look back on it. That's how time gets wasted. Pausing and reflecting. Let's say you add up all the minutes that you pause and reflect across a day. Let's say you really indulge and you do it all the time. Maybe we'll get up to 30 minutes combined. That is so much less than the amount of time that a typical person will waste checking email, right? Or checking Facebook or doing whatever, right? You know, I mean, if you get started on the wrong task, that's where time gets wasted.
Right.
Pausing and reflecting is how you get started on the right task. Without doing that, it's very difficult to get started on the right task unless you just have, you know, some days it's just like there's a particular deadline. I've already worked out precisely what's important and what needs to happen, and you've got it worked out the night before or the day before or even on Monday at the beginning of the week, and you can just execute all day long. Fine. Don't pause and reflect, right? You did your pausing and reflecting on Monday. That's a very unusual situation to be in where it's that crystal clear. Most of the time it's not, and it's very easy to get sucked into these situations where we're being reactive. Other people put things on our to-do list, especially through email, and then you're reacting to it. And there's value in it, you know, and you're maintaining relationships. But at the end of the day, you know that the important stuff for your business is not going to be that you handle those things. Those things will help. But if you're doing those things and you're not doing the other things, your business.
Time every day. And when we're intentional about how we spend our time, we have a greater chance of actually hitting the goal we're trying to achieve.
That's exactly right. Yes, that's the perfect word for it. Being intentional. Right. And so then the question of how becomes much easier, I think, once you're looking at it that way, because then it's like, well, of course I want to do this. I'm going to find lots of ways to do it, you know. And so one of them, Ben Franklin, he tried to do this almost every day of his life once he came up with the idea. He actually, first thing in the morning, would think about, I believe the way he phrased the question to himself was, what good am I going to do today? And he would think about that for a few minutes and really thought that it made a big difference. But even if you're not looking at it that way, you know, then it can be, what's the important stuff? And how am I going to give myself a chance to do that while I'm at my best today? How am I going to set up an hour or two where I can really focus on that, right? And, you know, if you do that, then you can afford to just be reactive and even waste some time the rest of the day because you did the important piece, right? So often you can actually get away with that. The thing is, though, some things I think that some caution is useful for is that I, for example, find myself doing this. I think it's very common that I'll be in the middle of working on something. I'm writing some proposal or, you know, I'm doing something at my computer and I feel like, hey, I've got energy. I'm fine. I can keep going. And then something distracts me. Somebody interrupts me, or I get up and I go and get a cup of coffee. And within a minute or two, I'm just like, wow, I am not able to think clearly right now. Like, if I hadn't stopped, I wouldn't have realized it.
Right.
Oftentimes, if you've been going for a while, if it's been an hour or more and you've been going, chances are you're actually not thinking as clearly as you think you are. And you can recognize that when you pause and reflect.
So every hour, should we be stopping for 5 minutes at least? 10 minutes? Is there a time frame?
I think the time is however long it takes you to kind of remember what's important and take stock of what your mental energy is.
Right.
And that could be as little as 30 seconds of, you know, closing your eyes. It could be 10 minutes. Sometimes, you know, it just takes a little while to unwind, especially if you're very emotional about something. You know, so it varies, but it doesn't need to be a long time.
Right.
And I'll offer one other thing. There's, I may be messing up the quote a little bit, but Gandhi is said to have.
As much information as we can get from you in these 30 minutes, the better.
Yeah. Well, so Gandhi once said, you know, I have so much to do today. I'll need to meditate twice as often. Right. So that he can just laser focus on the stuff that matters.
Right. And then that way we'll get more intentional, and that focus allows us to take the right action is at the basis of all of this, sounds like. Obviously, pause and reflect is incredibly important. It sounds like from all of your research and expertise, this is certainly a daily habit that you've instilled and you believe is a success habit. Are there any other, what would you say is a close runner-up?
Well, I do think that sometimes it's hard to get ourselves going. There can be little bit of like, oh, it's like, this feels like such a drag. How do I get myself to do this, right? When that's happening, it means there's something about the task that is harder for you than you think. You might say, oh, it's so simple. I just need to find the time. I just need to get myself to do it. But if you keep resisting, then maybe it's something that, you know, isn't your skill set, right? And so, for example, for me, I'm not very good at just taking a bunch of things on a spreadsheet and tracking them all and finding all the little details, or, you know, even mapping out a project plan. They're not my best skills. I can do it if I have to, and I frequently end up doing it, but it's not my strongest, right? So I often find myself resisting that kind of thing. It's not because it's the most important stuff, but sometimes it is important enough that I really do want to, because it's going to help me get to where I want to go, because it is an important step in something that really is important to me. And, you know, if I recognize that, then I realize, you know what, this is actually going to need to get some good attention when I'm awake, when I'm alert, right? So that's one kind of thing that needs good attention. Then there's the stuff that I think is more obvious that needs good attention, which is maybe I've got an important meeting or an important presentation, right? Or, you know, an important, like I'm meeting a new client for the first time, right? So those things, I also know I really want to be at my best. So these are kind of the range of things where I know I really want to be at my best. And sometimes, even if I pause and reflect and I know that, I'm just tired, or, you know, or I'm anxious, right? Or I'm distracted by all the other things going on. When that happens, there is a reset button.
What's the reset button?
Tell
us. I feel like it's about to come out.
Yes, there is a reset button. Often when we look at the research on exercise, what we're learning about is the long-term stuff. Like if you get to the gym, make sure it's a few hours a week, you know, like you'll live longer, you have better heart health, blah, blah, blah. And then as a result, maybe you'll do better at work, things like that. It's very indirect. It's long-term. You know, if that were how I was thinking about exercise, I would go to the gym for an hour at the end of the day, a few times a week, you know, and I would really try to like double up on the weekends. Then there's this other side of exercise research that just doesn't seem to get out into the public so much, but this is by no means a small amount of research. I mean, there are meta-analyses that look at trends across over 100 studies. There is an extraordinarily reliable, and this is why I think it's so key, extraordinarily reliable effect where if you exercise for about 20 minutes, so this is much less time, right? Just 20 minutes, not pushing yourself to the limit. Moderate exercise, you're breathing heavily, you're working up a little bit of a sweat. It's the kind of thing you can actually, you know, rinse off from and get back to work fairly quickly, even if it's in the middle of the day, right? And I understand other people have more hair than I do, but I've seen it done. It's doable.
For a man with short hair to say.
Right. So that is an extraordinarily reliable way to reduce anxiety and to help you be able to focus and let things go that don't matter in the short term. So we're talking about the acute effects. This is a side of exercise that almost nobody sees, you know, hears about in the news, the acute effects. What's going to happen in the next few hours? It's virtually like flipping a switch. It is so likely to reduce your anxiety and help you focus and just let the things go that don't matter, that I feel comfortable saying you can treat it like a guarantee.
Right.
If you need to reset, if you need to be able to show up and bring it, like, you know, it's game time, a little bit of exercise is an extraordinarily reliable way to get there.
Amazing.
Moderate exercise, not killing it, not pushing it, but like, so the first thing in the morning, you do it at your lunch break. You know, if there's nothing else that you can do, I literally stand up and jog in place in my office sometimes for 5 minutes and do a few jumping jacks, because I know how much that's going to change my ability to show up afterwards.
Right. You just took away everyone's excuse for getting active. You can really just stand up in your office, and it's not about pushing it to the limit, doing like a PX90 workout for an hour and a half. It's about 10, 20 minutes is optimal, but even 10 minutes or 15 minutes of moving your body is going to make a huge difference in how we perform.
Going to make a huge difference in how you perform. The other stuff, sure, I'm not saying don't do it. You can do that. It can be great for your health long term. This stuff is going to be how you perform. The irony is that you're likely to end up working out more because you're doing it for something that's very reliable and is short term. You can see the gains instantly. it's now a productivity tool for your work, right? So all of a sudden it becomes easier to do because it's not about, well, this thing I should do that'll someday make me healthier.
Amazing. I feel like I could pick your brain we joked about having you on for 3.5 hours before we started the interview, and I feel like I could actually interview you for another 3 hours, but unfortunately our time is up. I just want to thank you very, very much for being part of our series, and for all of your incredible insight, your tips and tools and expertise. You've given us a lot to think about today, so thank you. We really appreciate it. And thanks to everyone who is watching. And if you'd like to learn more about SLAP, our 13-month behavior change program, which is a 360-degree approach to helping you build the right action plan for your business, please make sure you do reach out, visit our website at www.smallbizsilverlining.com. Also, if you would like to learn more about Josh's work and how to get in touch with him, please do follow him on Twitter at Josh Davis, PhD. Thank you very much, Josh. Until next time, everybody.
Thank you.